They always say change brings opportunity. But on that dreary Tuesday morning, as I sat across from the new director I'd barely met, lukewarm hospital coffee turning bitter in my hands, change felt like a betrayal carved in stone. His name was Ethan. Ethan Blackwell, mid-30s with a custom-tailored suit and meticulously styled hair. The kind of man who spoke in motivational sound bites but listened with the attentiveness of concrete. It was his first day. Mine? My 3,654th, 12 years. 12 years of pre-dawn arrivals. Midnight departures. Cancelled holidays, debugged networks, and silent victories. I never needed applause. I needed acknowledgement. And now, with his lips curled into that practiced corporate smile, Ethan was about to discard it all before even learning where the break room was. He reclined, interlocking his fingers like he'd rehearsed this exact moment in his bathroom mirror. "Mira," he began, voice slick as oil. "This isn't about performance. We're simply realigning our talent. Fresh perspectives, innovative energy. You understand, right?" I held his gaze for a heartbeat, letting the quiet linger. "Of course," I said, voice steady. "Thanks for letting me know." His smile widened. He believed I was being gracious, cooperative, perhaps even thankful. But deep inside, I wasn't even angry. Not yet. I rose unhurriedly, smoothing imaginary wrinkles from my charcoal slacks. My pulse hammered, but my expression remained serene, polished. The version of me they had come to expect. Composed, competent, quiet. I knew every corridor of this hospital, every vulnerability in its networks, every shortcut in its architecture. Because I built them from nothing. And he had no idea. No idea that the patient management system he was about to stake the hospital's reputation on, my system, wasn't theirs to command. The intellectual property was registered in my name, filed years earlier. Bulletproof. I walked out of the office without another word, the door whispering closed behind me. The hallway seemed endless, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. My colleagues hunched over keyboards, murmuring, stealing glances. The news had spread as it always does in institutional buildings. Not through official channels, but like wildfire. Nobody met my gaze. They never do. When loyalty becomes inconvenient. At my workspace, I gathered my belongings methodically. A photograph of me and my sister from a weekend at Lake Michigan. A ceramic mug with a hairline crack. A small succulent I'd named Ferdinand that had somehow survived 3 department relocations. I moved deliberately, allowing the routine to center me. My ID badge, my encrypted drive. And finally, my laptop. That's when the hollowness began to settle. Not rage. Not grief, but something weightier. The system. I had engineered that platform during sleepless nights when the budget couldn't stretch for another developer. I had documented every process, crafted every update, and ensured no one could manipulate it without the proper credentials. My credentials. I had warned the board years ago, put my name on the software or I walked. They agreed. Signed the contracts, filed the documentation, then forgot. They always forget the woman behind the screen until the screen goes dark. By the time I reached my apartment, the gravity of the day began to sink in. I changed into comfortable clothes, perched at my kitchen island, and stared blankly at the blinking cursor on my laptop. But instead of tears, a slow, icy clarity washed over me. Ethan Blackwell had made a catastrophic error. He thought he was cutting expenses. He thought I was dispensable. He thought I was just a staff. What he didn't know was that the very foundation of Mercy Regional Hospital, the patient database architecture, the physician portals, the proprietary diagnostic algorithms that held every treatment plan together belonged to me. And in 6 days, I would make certain he understood it. Because the authorization needed renewal every financial quarter, and Saturday at midnight, it expired. I had 2 choices. Renew it silently and disappear with my dignity, or let the software revert to protected mode. A secured system inaccessible without my private authentication. No attack. No breach. Just business. Their game. My rulebook. I sipped my herbal tea slowly, my mind calculating every possibility. If they wanted to rescue themselves, they'd have to crawl back. Not for my position, but for permission to keep the hospital functioning. A half-smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. The same kind Ethan had displayed this morning. Let's see how he enjoyed receiving it. Next Saturday will be unforgettable. And I wouldn't even have to raise my voice. Wednesday morning arrived without fanfare. But the atmosphere in the hospital felt different. Too tense, too conscious. I walked through the automatic doors of Mercy Regional like I had every day for the past 12 years. Nobody intercepted me. Of course not. Human resources hadn't processed anything yet. Termination paperwork takes time. Until then, I remained technically employed. Still expected to be professional. Still expected to smile. I did. But it wasn't the kind of smile they recognized. Ethan's office door was shut. Probably occupied with adjusting his ergonomic chair, displaying his credentials. Pretending he comprehended the institution he'd just inherited. He had no inkling I was already orchestrating the gradual unraveling of his flawless first week. 6 days. That's all they had remaining. I approached my workstation. Well, the station I once called mine, and discovered a young woman seated there, fresh from university judging by her anxious expression. Nervous hands. She stood quickly when she spotted me. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you'd be coming in," she stammered. I smiled cordially. "No problem. Transitional period." Her name was Olivia. She'd been recruited to replace me, though she wasn't aware of the complete situation yet. She offered me a strained, embarrassed smile as I pulled a chair beside her and began explaining the system. I showed her the interface, the codebase organization, and how the physician portals operated. She asked intelligent questions. Thoughtful, perceptive, but I could tell it was overwhelming. The system was intricate, deliberately intricate, not from malice, but from necessity. Mercy Regional managed thousands of patient records and critical medical data. There were no shortcuts. Every element of the architecture demanded precision, complexity, experience, none of which Ethan possessed, and none of which Olivia could improvise. As the hours passed, I kept my demeanor even, my manner patient. I wasn't cruel. I didn't want to undermine her. She wasn't the problem. She was merely a symptom of a deeper disease. In this field, the assumption that expertise could be replaced. That experience could be downloaded like an update. But some things can't be substituted. Some people shouldn't be discarded. At lunch, I went to the bistro across the street and sat near the window, my laptop open before me. I retrieved the original intellectual property documents, the ones I had preserved in encrypted cloud storage for years. I reread every clause just to confirm everything was watertight. All rights, including derivative applications and extensions, remain the exclusive property of the original architect unless explicitly transferred through a written and notarized agreement. There was no such agreement. Mercy Regional never thought they'd need one. That was their first mistake. I sipped my tea methodically as I opened another window and began drafting the formal revocation notice. Measured. Legal. Decisive. It wouldn't lock them out completely. It would downgrade their systems to evaluation mode. Limited access, restricted functionality. Just enough to paralyze operations. Just enough to make them remember my name. I haven't submitted it yet. Not today. The timing needed to be perfect. The license expired at 11:59 p.m. Saturday. If I delivered the notice Saturday at 7 a.m., it would trigger the automatic downgrade by end of day, right when their weekly patient summary was scheduled. Right when physicians logged in to access updated medical records, the impact would be immediate and unattributable. I closed the laptop and leaned back, gaze drifting toward the window. Across the street, I observed Ethan exiting the building. Phone pressed to his ear. He laughed at something, loudly. Confidence. Oblivious. He had no idea. The hospital he was directing was balanced on a tightrope. That the rope was mine. that I could sever at any time. Back upstairs, Olivia was waiting for me, attempting to troubleshoot a minor issue in the records module. I guided her through it, watching her hands tremble slightly as she typed. "Are you all right?" I asked gently. She nodded. "Yeah. Just a lot to absorb. They told me the platform was straightforward." I gave a short laugh. "They always do." She paused, studying me. "Why are you helping me?" I met her gaze. "Because it's not your fault." That was the truth. I harbored no resentment toward her. My battle wasn't with the innocent. It was with the arrogant. With those who believed authority meant you could discard the very foundation of your success and still remain standing. By 5:30 p.m., I left the hospital with nothing in my possession but my phone. I didn't need to take anything else. They were already standing on my creation. The question wasn't if they'd collapse. It was how thunderous the crash would be and whether anyone would attempt to prevent it before it was too late. By Thursday, the atmosphere in the hospital had shifted. It was subtle initially, whispers behind closed doors, extended meetings. A flurry of emails with subject lines like urgent, portal access delay, or patient login timeout. I recognized the signals immediately. The system wasn't failing yet, but it was beginning to sputter and falter like an engine pushed beyond its limits without proper maintenance. I knew exactly why Olivia approached me mid-morning, her brow furrowed. Concern etched across her face. She clutched a notepad with hastily scrawled physician IDs. "Mira," she said, "5 different doctors are locked out of the records dashboard, and the system's generating an authentication error when I try to reset their access." I followed the protocol you showed me. She was doing her best. I could see she was intelligent, but the system wasn't designed for novices. It had layers, safeguards, conditional frameworks that even seasoned programmers had to decipher like puzzles. "I'll examine it," I said calmly, and together we sat at the station. The problem wasn't in the code. It was in the license. The expiration had initiated. A gentle countdown, silent but detectable. If you knew where to search. A warning message embedded in the back-end logs. Evaluation period ending in 3 days. Renew license or expect restricted functionality. The system was executing its instructions flawlessly. Everything was unfolding precisely as I engineered it, and no one, certainly not Ethan, had any comprehension of what approached. At 2 p.m., the hospital held its routine staff meeting in the glass-walled conference room. Ethan stood at the head of the table like a man who still believed he maintained control. His manner was buoyant, but I could tell it was too animated, too rehearsed. "I just want to express how impressed I am with everyone's adjustment," he began, clasping his hands. "I recognize transitions can be challenging, but I'm confident that this team, especially with fresh talent like Olivia, is progressing in the right direction." There it was again, the casual dismissal of experience, the glorification of new perspectives as if dedication and expertise were liabilities rather than assets. I remained silent. I just observed him. "Any questions before we conclude?" Ethan asked, surveying the room. There was a brief silence. Then Marcus raised his hand. "Actually, yes. Several physicians have been experiencing login delays and reporting partial outages on their portals. We're investigating, but it's been difficult to isolate." Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. "Just integration adjustments," he said with a smile. "We'll resolve it." I nearly laughed aloud. That was his response. Integration adjustments. No one commented further. The meeting ended in uncomfortable silence, with staff exchanging glances as they returned to their stations. Marcus passed me on his way out and muttered under his breath. "It's deteriorating." "I know," I replied softly. Back at my own station, I initiated a passive diagnostic. Not to repair it, but to monitor it. The system remained operational, but the errors were multiplying. Minor issues, refresh lag, connection failures, sporadic timeouts. But the actual collapse would arrive Saturday. These were merely tremors before the earthquake. I could have cautioned them. I could have instructed Ethan to verify the license, but I didn't. I had warned them years ago. They chose to disregard. They chose hubris over respect. Now they could face the consequences. That evening, as I exited the building, I noticed Ethan in the lobby speaking intensely to someone on the phone. His voice was strained now, edged with frustration. Not panic yet, but tension. He glanced at me as I passed, offering a curt nod. I returned it with an expressionless face. In his mind, I remained just an item to mark off, a formality, a remnant of the previous leadership being phased out. He hadn't connected the patterns. Not yet. At home, I lit a candle, brewed tea, and opened my laptop. The revocation letter was prepared. Sitting in draft, I reviewed it once more. Per Intellectual Property Registration #89721C, ownership of all proprietary systems and associated frameworks remains exclusively with the creator. Effective immediately, authorized access is rescinded. All I needed to do was press send. But not tonight. Tomorrow, the final day, will be the pivotal moment. The fissures were evident, but they still didn't believe the structure could crumble. They would. Friday felt like the instant before lightning strikes. Still. Heavy. Waiting. When I entered the hospital, the silence wasn't merely uncomfortable. It was fragile, as if the entire facility sensed something was amiss, but dared not voice it aloud. I walked past rows of workstations where conversations had diminished to murmurs, where monitors displayed error messages and support tickets accumulated faster than anyone could address. I saw Marcus pacing near the server room, phone pressed to his ear. He looked up and gave me a grim nod. I didn't need to inquire. I already knew the system was deteriorating. The initial symptoms were subtle. The physician portal refused to load for several users in the West Wing. Then came the malfunctions, medical record exports timing out, notifications failing to deliver, the reporting module choking on its own processes. Every error was a manifestation of the same underlying cause. The license was expiring, and by now the system was loudly reminding them of it. At my temporary station, I logged in and silently examined the logs. Warnings flooded the screen. Alert, license status expiring in 38 hours. Access to critical modules will be restricted at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Error, licensing API authentication failed. Invalid renewal token. Still, no one had approached me. Not Ethan, not human resources. Not even the hospital board. They were scrambling behind closed doors, undoubtedly assigning blame, attempting to patch something they didn't comprehend. I imagined Ethan in his office, frantically searching software licensing emergency while Olivia quietly struggled under the mounting pressure. She never volunteered for this. It would have been almost amusing if it wasn't so foreseeable. By noon, the first escalation materialized. One of the hospital's primary affiliates, a cardiology practice downtown, couldn't access their patient records dashboard. Their medical director personally emailed Ethan and copied 4 board members. Ethan stormed from his office minutes later, face flushed, tie loosened, voice tense. "Where's Mira?" he demanded. I stood calmly. "Right here." He approached swiftly, like someone who'd suddenly discovered the fire he ignored had reached his doorstep. "Have you noticed these issues? Why wasn't I informed this was occurring?" I tilted my head. "People have been discussing it for 2 days. Marcus highlighted it in yesterday's meeting." He blinked. For a moment, I witnessed it. The fear. A fracture in the confident facade. "Can you fix it?" he asked, striving to maintain an even tone. I paused. Not because I lacked an answer, but because I wanted the silence to linger. I wanted him to experience what it felt like to depend on someone else's mercy. "That depends," I said. "On what?" "On whether you still consider me replaceable." His mouth opened. Closed. No response. I returned to my seat. "I'll remain until day's end." As agreed. After that, I'm no longer contracted. Ethan stood there a second longer before retreating to his office. The remaining staff had overheard everything. A few people stared. Most quickly averted their gaze, but the balance had shifted and they sensed it. That evening, I departed precisely at 5. No overtime, no courtesy. I passed Ethan's office without a glance. He remained there, slumped over his desk, shoulders hunched, fixated on a screen filled with data he couldn't resolve. At home, the sky outside my window was darkening, streaked with purple like the final breath of daylight. I brewed a cup of tea, settled at my desk, and opened the email draft one last time. No revisions needed. I clicked send. The legal revocation notice was delivered to Mercy Regional, its executive team, and their legal department. The subject line was straightforward: termination of software license. Effective midnight. I exhaled. It was complete. I didn't cry out. I didn't celebrate. I simply closed my laptop and allowed the burden of 12 years to lift from my shoulders. Tomorrow would be Saturday, and everything they relied upon would begin slipping through their grasp. Not because I sabotaged anything, but because they released the one person who had been sustaining it all. Saturday, 6 a.m. My alarm sounded, but I was already awake. I'd been conscious since 5, sipping coffee at my kitchen window, watching the neighborhood gradually awaken below. Outwardly it resembled any other morning, but I knew differently. I checked my inbox. A torrent of replies had arrived overnight: legal inquiries, automated server warnings, and a futile attempt to renew the license. Too late. At exactly 11:59 p.m. the previous night, Mercy Regional's access to my software had officially terminated. Not attacked. Not corrupted. Just revoked. Clean. Legal. Final. The moment they began work today, they'd enter a world without a functioning foundation. I took a long sip of coffee as I accessed the remote monitoring panel. My discrete observation point into the system diagnostics. I didn't interfere. I simply watched. 7:32 a.m. System alert. Core modules offline. Error: authentication failed. Server unresponsive. Alert: records dashboard unavailable. Critical physician access denied. Invalid license. It had commenced. By 8 a.m., my phone vibrated. Olivia. I allowed it to ring once. On the second call, I answered. Mira. It's happening. Everything's crashing. Physician logins, dashboards, medical records. Marcus is frantic. And Ethan, he's panicking. Her voice trembled with anxiety. Not for herself, but for the chaos she'd stepped into. Did you examine the logs? I asked serenely. Yes. It indicates. It says the license is invalid. But how is that possible? I revoked it, I said softly. Silence. But why didn't you inform anyone? I did, I replied. Just not recently. It was never their software, Olivia. They just behaved as if it was. She didn't respond immediately. Eventually she whispered, Ethan's going to implode. Sounds like he already has. I ended the call. At 9:12 a.m., the news reached me before they could. System-wide failure impacts Mercy Regional Hospital. Physicians unable to access medical platforms. Major disruption in progress. By 9:30 a.m., my phone illuminated again, this time from an unlisted number. I didn't need to guess. I answered. Mira? Ethan's voice was constricted. Brittle. We have a crisis. The software, your software, shut down. Everything is failing. The physician portals, the patient database, the diagnostic tools. The board is assembling. Medical practices are threatening litigation. What have you done? I didn't do anything, I said coolly. I just stopped doing everything for you. You can't be serious. We had an arrangement. You were supposed to complete the transition. You terminated the arrangement. You terminated it on your first day. A pause, then softer. Listen, we can resolve this. Just tell me what you want. I'll consult the board. It's too late. No. Please, Mira. Be reasonable. Name your terms. I nearly laughed. Now he wanted to negotiate. Now that the structure was collapsing and the alarms were sounding. You still don't understand, do you? I said. This isn't about compensation. You dismissed the person sustaining your hospital. Now you're witnessing what happens when that person departs. Please, he said. And it wasn't merely panic anymore. It was desperation. I'm not returning, Ethan, I said quietly. I've already progressed. Perhaps you should too. I disconnected. And just like that, the weight I had carried for 12 years, every sleepless night, every dismissed suggestion, every board meeting where my name wasn't even mentioned, lifted. They were finally recognizing what I had been throughout. Indispensable. And they were recognizing it too late. By noon, Mercy Regional was trending on social media for all the wrong reasons. Patients furious after massive Mercy Regional breakdown. Internal source confirms licensing failure. Hospital in disarray. Stock plummets 23% in morning trading. I refreshed my feed and observed the chaos spread. Investors withdrawing. Physicians demanding explanations. Former employees posting thinly veiled messages. I did nothing. No interviews, no gloating, no retaliation. I didn't need to destroy them. They were accomplishing that themselves. By Saturday evening, Mercy Regional was in free fall. Their website had been reduced to a solitary error message. Helplines were overwhelmed. News outlets circled like vultures. And inside their modern facility, executives scrambled to rewrite agreements, reassure investors, and craft a narrative. No one was convinced. Meanwhile, I was sitting on my balcony, legs tucked beneath me, watching the skyline shimmer in the twilight. The turmoil, the chaos, the panic. It all seemed so remote now. Like observing a tempest sweep through a town you no longer inhabited. My phone vibrated again. Ethan. The 7th time that day. I let it divert to voicemail. Then I played it back. Mira, please. The board, everyone's looking to me for solutions, and I don't have any. The system is locked. Legal advises there's no workaround without your authorization. The medical practices are initiating legal proceedings. I know I erred. I was presumptuous. I didn't ask questions. I didn't honor what you created. Please, just return my call. His voice faltered slightly toward the conclusion. It wasn't the sound of a man in command anymore. It was the sound of someone who finally comprehended the price of cutting foundations. I didn't call him back because the narrative wasn't about Ethan Blackwell anymore. It was about me. About the 12 years I dedicated to a hospital that viewed me as an expense. About the mornings I arrived early, the weekends I spent troubleshooting others' mistakes. The innovations I shared in meetings only to have someone else repeat them louder. And now, they were left holding a hollow institution, gutted by their own carelessness. I opened my laptop one final time and checked my inbox. Propositions, dozens. Health networks, technology firms, startups, even several competitors of Mercy Regional who were suddenly very interested in the woman who brought a multi-million-dollar hospital to its knees without raising her voice. But I wasn't seeking employment. I wasn't looking to construct someone else's vision again. So I selected delete. Every offer, every flattery-filled message, every corporate pitch. Gone. I didn't need validation. I needed purpose. The following morning, I entered the offices of a small but influential medical technology incubator downtown. The founder was a woman I'd encountered years earlier at a conference. Someone who remembered my contributions when no one else did. She greeted me with a smile. Mira Patel. Word travels rapidly. I smiled in return. So I've heard. We settled in her sunlit corner office. She didn't waste time. So what do you want to create? I told her. Not another bloated, hierarchical medical system. No institutional decay, no faceless administration. A nimble, responsive platform that prioritized innovation over bureaucracy, where developers owned their work, where engineers had influence, where respect wasn't corporate jargon. It was woven into the architecture. By the time I concluded, she nodded. Once. We'll finance it. Whatever you require. I shook her hand. And just like that, I wasn't the woman who'd been dismissed on a Tuesday anymore. I was the woman who authored her own beginning. Back home, I prepared a fresh cup of coffee and opened a blank document on my screen. I titled it Framework. Not merely a business strategy, a blueprint for a different kind of company, one that didn't treat loyalty as expendable. One that didn't assume quietness meant insignificance. One that recognized the true value of respecting the people who constructed the walls they leaned against. As I typed, my phone vibrated again. One final message from Ethan. Mira. I resigned, effective immediately. I hope you're satisfied. I gazed at the screen momentarily, then deleted the message without responding. It wasn't the satisfaction I experienced. It was something deeper. Liberation. They had attempted to erase me, but I hadn't vanished. I evolved. I closed the laptop and stepped onto the balcony. The city extended before me. Open. Vibrant. Waiting. This wasn't revenge. This was reconciliation. And it tasted sweeter than anything wealth could purchase. Because the truth is, the finest vindication isn't dismantling what tried to bury you. It's becoming someone they can never reach again.